Welcome to this video, a new episode of the middle game strategy series. This series is about demonstrating middle game patterns and ideas. The more you see of them, the better your own middle game will become, enriching your positional understanding and the variety of ideas that you have in a position. Let's see what happened in this game that we're going to look at. It's played by later World Championship Bobby Fischer from 1960. 1960 means that Fischer at the time was 17 years old, so still very young. And he was at the time considered to be a big hope, a big prodigy. But of course, it's still years away from his run towards the World Championship title. Let's see what happened. His opponent is a local player from Argentina. This was played in Mar del Plata. Local player called Gadia. And we got an open Sicilian knight off. Yeah, makes some sense that he plays the knight off. Considering that Najdorf was living in Argentina at the time. Bishop to c4, which nowadays is deservedly called the Fischer variation. e6, bishop b3, b5, castles. All this is pretty standard. Nowadays white often plays queen f3, but okay, at the time this plan was not yet developed. Bishop b7. Yeah, a bit more common nowadays is bishop e7, but the black player is not very well advised in theory, as we see quite quickly. He plays the move knight c6 now, and I think this is not really a good setup. Probably knight to d7 is better. In some combination of move order, it's not quite clear to me if knight d7 or bishop e7 first should be played. But it seems that this move is not helping him very much. The reason is the following. White now captured on c6, bishop takes, or f5. By the way, there are various possibilities for black to play b4 and trying to snatch a pawn. Yeah, I don't really want to show those. It's interesting, but really does not fit to the theme of this video. The tactical complications after that. It's more about the arising structure. f5 now is played. This is attacking this pawn on e6 and gives some life to the bishop on b3. This is how Fischer usually played this opening, with a quick f4, f5. Nowadays, lots of this is diffused, but back then this was the standard plan. And here this is this plan in a very comfortable form, as black is now forced to play e5. Now we see the theme of this game already taking shape, the weak square on d5. Black has a weakness on d5, and this is happening quite often in various Sicilian lines. The Sveshnikov, the Najdorf, the Boleslavsky, and so on. There are many lines. Here we have a situation where black must be very careful. The reason is that white very quickly, here queen d3 first covering e4, white quickly gets in bishop g5. The idea is what white wants to do. He wants to exchange his dark squared bishop against the knight here to increase his control over the d5 square. It turns out that the move bishop e7 in fact wasn't the most precise in the position. If we go back, here black had the opportunity to obtain a playable position. What he should have played is b4. The idea is based on some concrete consideration. Knight d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. Yeah, a move like e takes d5 is not good at all, because it transfers a pawn to the d5 square where you really want to have a piece. So bishop takes, queen takes. And now black has a very concrete counterplay. Queen b6 check, king to h1, or rook f2. It's very similar. We can also do rook f2. And now rook to c8. We see that from a structural point of view, white has this favorable structure, but he does not have a minor piece left that can occupy the d5 square. The queen now is occupying the square, and black has a very concrete counterplay along the c file. That's very, very important. Black needs some compensation for his structural deficits. Here, white does not have much at all. It's very difficult to even cover the pawn on c2. If you consider something like queen d3 to cover c2, black can even play d5, initiating this threat. So maybe king f1, yeah. Then there is even queen b5 as a possible move.
Check.
Where after this, black has a combined counterplay against c2 and e4. There are some things that black can play for in this position. He went bishop e7 and now bishop g5. This threatens what happens in the game actually, the exchange on f6. And black is not doing much against it. It's however difficult already. A move like knight g4, for example, could be considered to try to trade bishop for bishop. But one problem is that after this, white can just play rook d1 and increase his pressure on d6. Black cannot win the exchange here, which looks attractive at first, because at the end here, e5 hangs, c6 hangs. This is a disaster. White is winning in the attack. Yeah, black's defense is already very difficult.
Check.
He played the check here. Okay, king h1, not much choice, and castled. Yeah, and here we see that Fischer now can perform a very advantageous exchange operation. He takes on f6, removing the defender of the weak square. That's the typical strategy. The weak square here is guarded by the knight, so you take it away. Here, for the weak light square, white has two pieces that can occupy it, but black only has one to defend it. The bishop on f6 is just a spectator in the structure. Here white has the choice. He can play knight to d5 or bishop to d5. If he goes knight d5, black will definitely take here. Bishop takes, rook c8 maybe, and let's say c3 to remove the pawn from the constant attack. This position is better for white. There's no question there. The bishop on d5 is just better than the bishop on f6. However, by comparison, what happened in the game is even more problematic for black. Bishop d5 was played. This move, strategically speaking, is much stronger. You want to exchange the bishop so that you can establish a knight on d5. This is called the eternal knight. Yeah, this knight is absolutely impossible to remove. Therefore, this is a very attractive move to play. What needs to be considered are the concrete circumstances in this position. After rook c8, for example, white trades and black recaptures with the rook. If he would have taken with the queen, for example, we need to be very, very careful how to continue. It's all very nice, but the knight is not on d5 yet. Here white needs to play accurate preparation moves. If you play rook c1, for example, to cover c2 so that you can go knight d5, there is bishop g5 and suddenly things are not clear at all. You have just given away control over c2 and given up the pawn. Rook c1 does not help. But black has the idea before. So what should we do? Just play a prophylactic move, a3. Take the active possibility away. Let's say black plays rook d8. How do you continue? You want to play knight d5. So what we need to do is, we need to provide some cover for the pawn. Rook c1, there is again bishop g5. Does not help. But there is rook f2. This is a strong move. It covers c2 and allows knight d5. And once the knight is there, we can continue from there. We don't really need to establish how we continue after that. Step by step, improve the position. Rook f2 is a very strong maneuver in that way. Black played rook c6, however. Yeah, what should white do now? It's still about precision. If white goes knight d5, where you want to be, this isn't so great actually. Black has a very strong reply, and this is queen to d4. At first you think, wait, isn't this like absolutely terrible from a structural point of view? Yeah, it looks like that, but it's all about concrete considerations. If white now decides
check
to completely wreck black's pawn structure, black has two double pawns now, he should still consider concretely how to continue. In fact, white has given up all hopes of an advantage with this operation, simply because the c-pawn and the e-pawn are so weak. Black's somewhat wrecked structure is not that important. White here has big problems to even keep the pawns. c2 is hanging immediately. If you play rook c1, black plays rook e8. And how do you even cover e4? If you go rook e1, rook c8, and c2 is falling. You cannot play this because of d3 and black wins immediately. It's a huge mistake to play knight d5. That this really would give up all the advantage. Fischer, however, of course, is well known for his precision. He played rook a to d1. This is a strong move to prepare further proceedings. It looks at the d4 square, and if black plays queen d4, for example, he could do this and the next move, then there's always a queen move to go away from the d-file. Yeah, black now played rook c8, which puts up relatively little resistance. More interesting is queen c5 with the direct idea to play b4. Yeah, how does white continue after that? Again, you need to be precise. Knight d5 is just blundering the pawn, not a good idea. But we have rook d2. This is strong. It covers c2 and prepares knight d5 again. If black goes bishop g5, we just move the rook to e2. Knight d5 is the next idea. If he goes queen d4, we can remove the queen. Yeah, and now everything is nicely coordinated. For example, after f6, we finally get in the desired knight d5 move with threat of knight e7, and becoming c3 will also expel the queen. Here white has total control and will proceed from here. How we will proceed, we will see in the game. This was played. Knight d5. Now it's possible, because black has no active reply. If he goes queen d4, he's unfortunately blundering his queen. Black went queen d8. There is no big choice. c3 was played, and now we have the perfect setup. The knight is on d5. It cannot be traded against any other minor piece, and we have total control over the position. Black has no active play whatsoever. Note that the c3 pawn and the knight on d5 also control the important b4 square, so that a possible counterplay like a5, b4 is very difficult to achieve. Black now went bishop e7. Here we come to a key position of this game. White undisputably has a very nice position, but how to continue? The usual question. White here in fact has more than one good way to play. But I absolutely love Fischer's continuation here, because it's so yeah, it's a very original and nice solution to this position. What white lacks here is open files. You have a hard time to make any concrete progress. The situation is relatively closed. The knight on d5 is very nice, but it also means that with the knight on d5 you won't win the d6 pawn easily. So how can white proceed? There are two things that white can do. White has a direct attacking continuation, and I will show this briefly because it's not the main point of this video. White also could have played f6 here, which would have led to a strong attack. For example, if black takes, white even has the strong exchange sacrifice, rook takes f6. It's quite funny. Takes, rook f1, and white has a very strong attack. After king h8, for example, there is queen to h3, which is a strong continuation, combining ideas of knight f6 and possibly knight e7 if black removes his queen from the e7 square. For instance, queen g8, knight e7 is a possibility. The move f6 was strong, but Fischer, as it is well known, he always wanted clarity on the board. He maybe couldn't calculate f6 to a mate or a very, very forced win, so he was looking for an alternative. And he came up with a super strong strategic move. Maybe you can treat this as a puzzle and try to find how Fischer now managed to make progress here. I'll be silent for a couple of seconds and then show the move. Yeah, white played the very strong move, rook to a1. This is a very, very, very nice move. Yeah, it looks very strange because it removes the rook from the half-open d file, but it has a very, very clear idea. Quite obvious once you see it, a4. White wants to play a4 to open up here the a file and enter with the rook. With a4, you also manage to create more weaknesses on the queen side. You will either take on b5 and settle him with the weak b pawn, or black needs to take and has a weak a pawn. This is a super strong move, really. Black now played the very ugly defense f6, just a move you don't want to play. He was probably still worried about f6 happening, so f6, very, very ugly. Bishop f8 is the move that you want to check. What happens after that? Yeah, white of course plays a4. And here black only has a choice between various evils. If he wants to protect the b5 pawn, it was hanging after all, white has the strong move knight to b4. Just attacking the rook and picking up material. For instance, after this, yeah, the rook here is trapped, you will lose this. Or for example here, if black goes here, you run into this fork. Knight b4 wins material. If black takes, we just recapture and get a new target. After a5, white can first improve. Rook a1, for example, rook b8, on queen e2, something like that. The further plan is quite clear. b4, b5. This is how you continue here. The b pawn is an important asset, and it's almost like having an extra pawn. If you look at this, for example, white enjoys the b pawn, and the d pawn is basically, yeah, it's not there. Not anything that black can use. So a very, very good position for white. Alternatively, black here after rook takes a4 could play rook b8, after which we go b4, fixing the a6 weakness. Just very nice. So after a4 here, white retains a great advantage. Rook c4, there's ab, ab, b3, rook c5, rook a7, and we go from there. Yeah, white might even get in something like this. Rook a1, rook b7, rook 1 to a7. Yeah, black is devoid of any counterplay. Unfortunately, in the game, in a way unfortunately for our purposes, he went f6. And this is really even more ugly. Of course, a4 was now played. This was Fischer's plan all along. Yeah, black's relatively best defense here is to go for something like we have examined before, but with like that, for example, with the move f6 being a further problem. White now has a fantastic position, but it still would have taken some moves to convert that. Yeah, it's comparable to what we've seen before, something like this. You can always play a move like that, by the way. Yeah, make sure your king is not back rank mated, and then go with b4. Something like this is a clear way forward. Black is in a terrible situation. The b pawn will win the game. In the game, unfortunately, the black player being under that big pressure committed a fatal mistake, and this led to immediate defeat. Unfortunately, it would be great to see how this game would have ended in a logical fashion in a way, but what can you do? Black now played rook b8, and this is now something not very difficult. The only slight problem here for white is that you need to consider the first move to play it. White now took on e7.
Check.
Looks ridiculous, yeah, giving up your knight against this dummy bishop. But yeah, after queen e7, queen
Check.
d5, white just wins the rook. So black basically blundered a whole rook in this game, which is a shame. As mentioned, would have been great to see the technical phase of the game unfold. How Fischer would have played that would have been good to watch. But still, it's a very nice instructive example how to continue in such an overwhelming position. Rook a1 is just a super strong move that shows that you need to find good ways to open up the position and proceed from there. White also creates further weaknesses with this idea of a4. Very nice way to continue. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's good for seeing this this strong point on d5 as the starting point for further improvements like rook a1 and a4. This happens really often to get this eternal knight, and you need to proceed from there. Okay, I hope you liked it. Thanks for watching.